Hello friends, this is Lilia and today we will be doing CAE Speaking Part 4 questions. I will take you through a couple of questions from that part, and while responding to the questions, I will be relying on a strategy that I think works best for this exam. I will share this strategy at the end of this video, so please stay with me. While watching me responding to the questions, see if you can notice the strategy that I'm using. And if you're interested in this content, let me know in the comments, and please give this video a like if you think it is worth it. I wouldn't want to generalize when answering this question because this question has an unknown variable within it, and that is right. I wouldn't want to be more realistic when responding to this question, but what comes up in my mind right now is that people's priorities are directly dependent on the values that people hold. And the values that people hold are in direct correspondence with a person's level of psychological development. People come in all shapes and sizes, but even more than that, we tend to be developed in a different way depending on the level of our psychological growth. And there is a whole field titled developmental psychology with amazing models such as spiral dynamics or 9 stages of ego development by Susan Cook-Greuter that are in open access, and we can all read up about those models. They have to do with our values that we hold as human beings, and our priorities are directly correspondent with those values. So depending on the values that we hold that also are in flux throughout our lifetime, we tend to adopt specific priorities, which are also completely dependent on the level of development that we're at. So I don't think it would be right to say that some people have the right values whereas other people don't. I think everybody has a value that is in direct correspondence with their level of psychological growth and development, and that is something that we can have an impact on and something that we can work on. So the more we develop, the more inclusive and holistic and systemic we become, and the more nuanced our minds become, and more loving and compassionate we become. So the level that we're at in terms of our priorities and values is in direct correspondence with the level of development that we're at. And that is not a constant. That can and should be changed. I would really love to, if I can, define the word easy. What do we mean when we say that life is easier right now? Perhaps if we're talking about certain aspects, such as the physical comfort or survival chances, then definitely so. Our life is way simpler than that of our grandparents and great-grandparents. When we're talking about communication, yes, we can access each other's minds way easier than back in the olden days or in the time of our grandparents. But if we're talking about the current level of our societal development, there is a very, very high level of complexity that we have to deal with right now. And by saying complexity, I mean mental and psychological complexity, distinguishing between what is true and what is false, which is something that is up to us to put our mind to. I actually think that in this regard, our lives are way more difficult because when our grandparents were of our age and when they were inhabiting our planet, perhaps like 50 or 30 or 100 years ago, the world was very different, and very often information was fed to people. And there was a selected source of information that people felt they could rely on, whereas in the current day and age, this is not necessarily the case, and there's actually a downside of the freedom of speech, which also has many benefits. Because everybody has the right to share what they think, myself included, there is such a multitude of opinions circulating and orbiting the planet these days that it might be very difficult to differentiate between high consciousness and low consciousness opinions, And the criteria according to which we should define whether an opinion is worthwhile or not worthwhile, in terms of whether it should be followed or trusted, or should it not be followed and trusted. And that is up to us to decide. In that respect, our world is increasingly complex, and we should develop tolerance for this high level of complexity without simplifying it or sliding down into the black or white thinking. This is a very thought-provoking subject to consider, and I would hate to make it one-dimensional. Let's rather zoom out and take a kind of a big picture view. It really depends on what is meant by the word happiness. If you sit down with a clinical psychologist and a 5-year-old child, for instance, their definitions of happiness are likely to be very different. The clinical psychologist might tell you that, yes, perhaps the money will grant you the freedom to allow you the freedom of choice, and that will allow you to kind of to delve into alternative ways of living your life and expressing yourself in a variety of ways, which might not be available to someone whose income is lower. But then the 5-year-old child will be likely to tell you that happiness is just being with mom, or happiness is just being with God or with family, whatever, right? Happiness is when mom gets me a candy or something like that. So it really depends. If you ask a spiritual guru what happiness is, they will be likely to tell you something along the lines of, perhaps happiness is love and joy of our true nature, which does not lack anything, which is full and everlasting and eternal. And recognizing that and being conscious of that is actually what we might refer to as happiness. If we focus on the spiritual guru's words, based on them, I don't think it would be fair to say that money can buy you happiness, because everyone's chances of realizing their true nature are equal. But if we're talking about financial security and the ability to broaden the range of choices that you have on an everyday basis, then perhaps the answer would be yes, money can definitely get you this financial freedom to a certain degree. So it really depends on what we mean by happiness. The strategy that I used when responding to the questions was this. You could have noticed that with those bulkier and loftier questions that tend to err on the cerebral end of the spectrum, we are often asked to reflect on big issues, right? And the responses that we give really depend on the level of development where we are at. I don't think there is such a thing as a right or wrong response to any of those questions, because remember, examiners don't assess you on your ideas. Rather, what we're being assessed according to is our ability to be elaborate and fluent. So just to give myself a little bit of room for thinking, I started defining the words that could be viewed through the prism of black or white within the questions. And those words included happiness, right, and so on. See if you can do that with your powerful responses, and let me know if you found this video helpful. My name is Lilia. I'm running this channel Intelligent, where I teach English in what I think would be an intelligent way, and I'm very thankful to you for watching. Have fun and have a beautiful day wherever in the world you are. Bye bye for now.